What's up, everybody? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Bassam Hanna podcast. Today, I am very lucky to have a seasoned real estate expert and I'm going to say quite opinionated person in general in Marlon Bray. Normally, when we do this podcast, I'm interviewing entrepreneurs, but I'm trying to move the focus a little bit. In addition to doing entrepreneurial focused interviews, is to give people a little bit more in-depth data-backed real estate conversations, as that's the industry that I'm in and that I love to talk about. Marlon, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the invite.
Before we get started, can I get you to maybe give the audience a brief introduction about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I've been in the business over 25 years now. I'm starting to feel a little old. With the accent, you can tell from England. Basically, I used to be a quantity surveyor in England. My wife pre-wife days, came over vacation, hated the rain in England. I moved here. I've been here for the last 22 years now. Quantity surveyor is not really a business that you see in Canada. It tends to be more so a cost consultant. Also, I do a lot of speaking engagements, so I'm an amateur economist these days, it seems to be.
Yeah, well, so actually the first time that I actually met you was at the real estate forum where you were speaking at one of the panels. And I very quickly noticed that you are not afraid to speak your mind.
No, I believe in honesty, and I always have done. And I think there's way too much talking, especially in the real estate industry. And we've started to look at housing crisis. And I think the only way to move forward is people just need to start being more honest. And every little step forward is an improvement to me.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm hoping that we can unpack some of that today. So prior to getting an advisory, and so forgive me, I'm going to ask you a few what seem basic questions, just because I want the audience to understand exactly what it is that you do. Sometimes the people that are watching this don't have maybe as much real estate experience as you or I do. So for the layman, what is quantity surveying and what is advisory? Or what kind of advisory do you do specifically?
So it's always funny because everyone that works with me, including a bunch of the young guys, they can never explain what they do to anyone. So it's like this constant theme of, I think even my wife struggles to understand what I actually do all day. But in essence, quantity surveying is an old English sort of consultancy that's been around for 400 or 500 years. And they're the money people in construction or development. So in essence, we look after the budgets, the risk side of things from sort of cradle to grave. The Canadian version of us is called a cost consultant. It's kind of a dumbed down version of what we would be in the UK. So primarily we'll be putting together the budgets, the pro formas early on with the developers. We'll be helping them make decisions in terms of investment decisions, design, optimization, stuff like that. And then once you move through the design phase, you hire a contractor. We can assist with that side of things. And then once we get into development, that's usually where our monitoring guys come in. And then they act on behalf of the bank, advancing the money to the developer, in essence, then flip from developer side to lender side, right. Sort of protecting the lender in terms of advancing funds.
Okay, so for those that don't... I just want to reiterate how important this is because there's a few critical moments in the construction development process. Having the cost consultant or quantity surveyor verify your numbers is probably one of the most important steps in you qualifying for construction financing and then maintaining your construction financing through construction, because you basically tell the bank, you're the bank's eyes and ears to make sure that the developer is on track, off track, or what's going on in the project, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
And I mean, one of the nuances is that originally when the industry started helping the lender, they just worked for the lender. But there was a point, I think probably 20, 25 years ago, where the cost consultants then started helping the developer. And the way it's looked at is it's not a conflict. By helping the developer, you're making sure that the budget's more robust, there's less risk. You're helping reduce the risk of the developer. And at the same time, if the bank's having you do this service anyway, you might as well try and add as much value into the process in terms of how can I get better returns, what are the risks, what can I do different, and that's where that advisory part comes in now, where it's sort of morphed into more of an advisory role. We're there basically as not just the eyes and ears of the bank, but with that second sober thought process for the developer. Could I look at this different? Could I optimize it different? Especially with where the market is these days, where trying to get a return is almost impossible on a lot of stuff. So yeah. It's a different world where that second opinion, and it's generally driven because we just see so many projects. I mean, my team does over 500 estimates a year. the company, Altus across Canada looks at about 1,000 new projects a year. It's just that level of experience all rammed into our, brings us like that different depth of opinion and different viewpoint that living in your own bubble with 3 or 4 developments on the go, 4 or 5 developments, sometimes you get caught up a little
perspective.
bit. Yeah.
You provide perspective. Now, let's talk about Altus.
Yes.
Is Altus a small player or a big player in the real estate game?
Well, we actually have close to 3,000 employees globally, so fairly sizable. It's a company that does quite a lot of different stuff. We're sort of part data, technology, software. And then the other side is more of the advisory side around property tax, real estate valuation. Then obviously there's a cost group. And then the big shift over the last few years is definitely onto the data side because there's a gap in sort of that market. And then obviously with things such as machine learning, AI, bringing all of those stats together to help developers make better decisions. And then we're producing the software to allow developers to manage their portfolios and their projects as well. So it all kind of ties in. And then the advisory comes in depending what stage developers are at, and it creates sort of this full cycle where there's always something we can help you. And we've sort of moved from a Canadian company now, North America, Europe, we're out in Asia, Australia, and sort of that global growth has carried on now through mainly acquisition of companies, but is acquisition of companies that always add. So it's always something
adding
new.
A service,
it's always something sort of new, or there's a nuance to it, or there's a tweak to it that tries to build something that's better as an overall group sort of thing.
That's Altus's free plug for today.
Well, usually I don't do any marketing. I'm really funny because I go out and say, I won't do any marketing. And then when you ask me, I'm like, okay, I'll do a little bit of marketing. But I'm bad when I do my market slides. Basically, the market is done verbally. Because like, I always hate when you go to do a presentation, it's like 50 slides about the company. It's kind of like,
the About Us section is longer than the actual presentation.
If you can't do an elevator pitch in 30 seconds, your company's got nothing to sell. And I think Altus has a good elevator pitch that works about how they come in and provide that service.
I agree. You know what? I've actually used Altus. I've used them recently. I find that the work that they provide, they are great for supplementing areas where you may not necessarily want to hire full-time employees, or you don't have the scale to get there. So I have nothing but good things to say about the firm. You personally, what motivates you from a work perspective?
Well, it's always really lame when I say this, but I can't do things for the sake of it. So I have like ADHD. I'm terrible for that, sort of bouncing all over the place. You can probably tell, but so I can't do stuff for the sake of it because I have no patience.
Okay.
So I'm all about sort of adding value, looking at stuff differently. I like to innovate. I actually like to help people, and it's kind of funny. Like my daughter say, "What do you do?" Well, I help developers get wealthier, and then she's like, "What do you mean?" Well, that's the primary goal: protecting risk. Looking after people. The same when we work on the public side is trying to give the best advice you can give. It's a little trickier on the public side because I think my honesty doesn't necessarily work in public sector as well as it does in the private sector, but I wake up wanting to do something different, wanting to do something change. I like innovation. And my day has to be different every day or I get bored.
You know what? That's not a bad thing. Speaking of that, in your history or that you can think of, what is the biggest professional mistake that you have made?
See, you sent this on last night, and I'm actually struggling because, you know what?
Tell me your biggest screw up, yeah.
Well, the problem is every little mistake actually bugs me, but then I leave them behind.
Okay.
So when you said, what's the biggest one? I'm like, the one I made yesterday or the one that was the day before, because it really irks me.
Okay, give me an example. Give me like a tangible example.
So if we make a mistake in an estimate or it's a genuine error, even if it was one of my staff, that bugs me for like a week. I can't sleep. I've got to fix it straight away. Like I'm the sort of person that'll get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, correct it, send out the email, apologize, stuff like that. But some of the tangible errors that sometimes reoccur is I can get into zero-sum arguments by getting a little bit overexcited, and zero-sum's usually bad if you're negotiating with a trade or you're dealing with staff internally or you're dealing with, say, an architect.
Right.
And by zero-sum, I mean you get into an argument where you already know this is going to head into a place where neither side can win.
And then
But then it tends to go bad. So I've had a few of those. And then the other one I learned is if you do make a mistake, you can't nag yourself endlessly about it. You figure out how you made the mistake. You make sure you don't make it again. If that's a process change, it needs happening. If that's a people training thing, it needs happening. Whereas I think one of my younger days, the biggest mistakes I'd make was just fix everything myself. That I'll get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and fix it myself.
Right.
The problem is the person that made the mistake then never learns. So you basically just clean up mess all the time.
Right.
And then one day you realize, wait a minute, I'm a professional. I didn't get into this job to clean up people's messes. And it's that training, mentoring, and it's a real shift I think happens as you get older. It's
the give a man a fish, feed him for a day,
Yeah.
teach a man to fish, feed him for a life.
So that most
Yeah.
of my
Or
errors
a
tend to be more
person,
so
a
around that
person,
sort of
not
thing.
just
Yeah.
a man.
I
Yeah.
don't think I've done a huge error that's put someone out of business yet that I can think of. I mean, should touch wood
That's
on that one,
good.
but
That's
so
good.
far I can't think of any singular massive ones, but it's mainly a lot of smaller stuff that just drives me completely nuts.
Okay. So now that we know who you are and what you do, I wanted to jump into like the meat of the questions because I brought you on here to give some more color or some insight as to kind of the current state of affairs in Toronto, in Canada. So I'd like to jump in. What is your view on the construction costs in the GTA currently, especially as they compare to the rest of Canada and the US?
I mean, the costs are, right now it's probably the best time we've had to purchase construction since 2017, 2016 perhaps.
Okay.
So right now prices in essence are falling, probably in the range 5-6% depending what type of projects on the high-rise side.
But you're saying falling relative to itself a couple of years ago.
Yeah, so it's gone up from the peak and then it's dropping off. In essence, it's a supply-demand thing. The number of, if you look at high-rise in particular, the number of units has dropped off significantly under construction. We peaked at about 122,000. Right now, we've dropped off. We're probably heading to 110, then down to 100. That whole national thing of starts are slowing due to the weight of interest rates.
Right.
So if you're building, it's an advantage. The challenge you have, obviously, is the revenue side is flat
No
as
one's
well.
buying, yeah.
So yeah, costs come down, but revenue hasn't really shifted. We'll talk about some of those challenges later on, I think, on the soft cost side. But if you look at cost relative, Toronto's not actually too bad in terms of construction costs. The biggest problem we've got is they just keep going up. And revenues need to go up as well. So we're going to hit a point where that affordability clicks in. And if you look across Canada, yeah, right now, Vancouver's more expensive to build than here, but their escalation's lower. We've just been catching up with them for the longest time.
But what about a place like Calgary?
Calgary's only marginally relatively cheaper to build, and that's because their oil and gas collapsed. If they'd have carried on at the same pace they were going at, they'd have been the most expensive. So again, it's that supply-demand side of things
Right.
really shifts things. But if you went out to Calgary, you're going to build for a lower cost than Toronto, but your revenue's also lower, but your revenue's affordable. And that's why there's a degree of relativeness. Like, for example, in Halifax right now, construction costs are lower than here, but they're relatively extremely high compared to the market and the revenue.
Right.
So the actual dollar value doesn't matter anymore.
Okay.
And I saw someone the other day, they posted on LinkedIn, they're like, oh, in Detroit, there's a brand new house, $135,000 US.
Right.
How come we can't build those in Canada?
Yeah.
Well, you can. The challenge you've got is the amount of regulation and red tape we have here is completely different than the US. And people forget construction's, like on high-rise, construction's less than 50% of the cost. So
Right.
yeah, construction's up. The big challenge we've got is all of those other numbers lead to a big number that makes it expensive.
So that's kind of what I want to get at. So, like, I'm currently under construction or just about to start construction on a tower in Toronto.
Yep.
Our costs are, coming in at like $850 to $950 a square foot all in. And no matter what we do, like we could try to squeeze our trades as much as possible, but we might drop at $25 a square foot, right? Like there is a substantial amount of soft cost and like municipal charges
Yeah.
and things like that go into building up that number. Why is it like that in Toronto versus everywhere else, or in the GTA versus everywhere else?
Well, if you look, the GTA it does vary, but if you look on, say, a high-rise project, 25% of the total sales price goes to municipal and DCs in Toronto.
Right.
If you went out to somewhere like Milton or Halton, that's probably around 17-18%. And the same then when you move around, say, Ottawa, 17-18%, you go to Vancouver, we're back up in that 22-25%.
Right.
The challenge you have is basically the entire tax system's broken from federal level down to municipal level. So the municipality is given a bunch to do, but has no way of generating taxes. Feds take a bunch of tax, blow it all on whatever the mood of the day is, and they don't send the money back down. So if you look at, say, from housing, how much money is put into infrastructure, around that goes to the federal government, around 30% goes up to the federal government. They only invest about 7% of that back, so about 25% of it back. They keep the other 75% housing contributes to them for themselves.
Right.
And that's the challenge, is it's sort of broken. So DCs are being used as a quasi-tax thing. The other aspect is people who pay DCs don't vote because they're buying a new home.
Right.
So to keep property taxes artificially low, you bump up DCs to pay for all of your stuff. The challenge you have, if you look at Ontario, for example, since 2019, I think it is, DC revenue's up 72%. The reserve fund...
Since 2019?
Yeah, across the whole province in terms of absolute dollars, not in terms of what they charge, absolute dollars raised.
So in 4 years, we've almost doubled.
Yeah, in 4 years. And then the other thing that's interesting, if you look at the reserve fund, that's the money that sits in reserve not committed, that's up 77% in the same time period.
Okay, so we're not using the money.
They're not using it. So right now, Ontario sits on about $10.5 billion in unused DC revenue.
Okay.
And they're just not spending it. Why? Because they just double it, and then they go, we're going to use it in the future. A reserve fund's a good idea. And the challenge is, if you looked into, say, Vancouver right now, they just said, wastewater's a mess. We're not going to make existing property tax owners pay for wastewater. We're going to put all on new construction. So they basically added like $20,000 on a single home, $14,000 in an apartment, only for wastewater.
Right.
And then at the next moment, those same civil servants will come out and say, we don't understand why housing's unaffordable and no one's building. Well, that's the challenge. And then if you look, even within the cost side of things on the soft cost, you look at land. Land's valued by supply and demand. Again, how much is it? The reason land's so expensive in Toronto and Vancouver, it's a location-wise, but part of it is land regulation. Vancouver, Toronto, extremely complicated. It makes the cost of land more expensive because it's so scarce.
Right.
And it's so scarce because trying to get something approved is like smashing your head against the wall. So then the value goes up, supply and demand again. You pop out to somewhere like Milton, which is where I live, all of a sudden land's sort of affordable. The challenge we've got there is, we still got this DC environment, we've still got HST on new homes. Obviously, the rental side's been corrected to a degree. All of those costs just get stuck together, adding interest rates, and now nothing works. So the whole of Canada's basically grind into a halt, kind of coast to coast, with the exception, obviously, of Calgary, that's doing reasonably well.
Right.
And then Halifax is completely nuts. Like Atlantic is kind of crazy.
In a good way or a bad way?
A good way. It depends, good or bad. They need housing desperately. So there's a lot of developers stepped up and started building. It's all rental products, almost 100%.
Right.
And they're really pushing forward. The challenge is as they push forward, then I get labor shortages and I get cost challenges. Now it becomes more expensive. And we end up on this, it's like a hamster wheel.
Right.
And that's the problem. The process to develop, it hasn't really evolved or changed. You're stuck around this municipal, federal, provincial mess that just creates this hamster wheel where everyone hops on it, runs round and round and round and round. And to your US point, I was on a call with a couple of developers from the US the other day, one in Seattle, one in Chicago, and they were commenting now when they go down to Florida and Texas, it's full of Canadian developers these days. Yeah, because you can make money there.
Yeah.
You wander down to Texas, you get off the plane, the mayor hugs you and says, when are you going to be finished your building? You go into Toronto, they go, who the hell are you? And then you wait forever to get your building approvals. They basically delay it as much as possible. You're dealing with NIMBYs. And in the US, you probably already built 4 projects before you've even got one approved here.
So on that approval point, how long does it take, in your experience, to get a project through its development approvals timeline in Toronto / the broader GTA?
Toronto's the worst. So we did a study in 2022, and we did one in 2020. Toronto's the worst place in Canada. I would actually argue Toronto's the worst place in North America for development approvals and speed.
Yeah.
You're probably talking
I
at least
agree.
4 or 5 years potentially getting through that zoning SPA period. Could be longer depending on what you get into with LPAT and all those sort of things. Calgary's one of the best. Now, it's not the fastest, but the reason I like Calgary is because relative size, it's large. And there's some smaller places that are... What's the difference? There, it's about getting it done. It's an attitude thing.
Right.
The planner's there to facilitate between you, the local constituents, the councillor, to solve a problem and move it forward.
Right.
In Toronto, the entire system seems largely focused on how do I come up with an excuse for delaying the thing.
Yeah.
And it's the process that's broken. And then the other challenge you get in both Toronto and Vancouver is this mission creep. And what I mean by mission creep, if you look what the city's supposed to do, it adds all these extra things. Growing up in high-rise buildings, that little booklet we created. There's a guideline.
Oh, growing up guidelines?
Yeah, try and go get something approved. All of a sudden, it's no longer a guideline.
Yeah.
We want you to do 3-bedroom units at 10% because we want families to move in. Oh yeah, because $1.5 million units are affordable housing.
Yeah. And a family that has $1.5 million wants to live in a 3-bedroom condo.
Exactly,
instead of
and
a
that's the problem.
townhouse.
And that's mission creep to me.
Right.
What the hell has that got to do with you? If you start to look at sustainability standards,
Also, it's a guideline, not a policy.
but try negotiating something, all of a sudden it becomes a policy.
Listen, like I've from my lived experience, I've been trying
Yeah.
to get something approved on Shepherd and Bathurst. We originally bought the site to turn it into rental when rental still worked, which we'll get to in a second. And then we have spent the last 18 months converting it from rental, exact same built form, but
Yep.
we want to remove rental tenure so that we can build a condo there, so that we can actually get the project up and going. It's been, it has not been fun, just
No,
to put
it's
it
hell on
lightly.
earth.
Yeah. So is this sustainable?
No, not at all. In fact, the entire it's collapsed, or it is in the process of collapsing. Richard Lyle from ResCon always likes to call housing crisis, and I was having some back and forth with him the other day, and I'm like, I think we went past crisis about a year ago.
Yeah.
So when do we start calling this a catastrophe? What's next after crisis?
What's after crisis? Yeah.
Yeah, like you kind of like, well,
Shit show.
Yeah, well, DEF
Yeah.
told us some numbers, but
Yeah.
I'm like, what the hell do you do with it? And it's actually going to get worse, not better. For example, Mayor Chow's going to
Which is
hire more
scary.
planners.
Yeah.
I don't think that'll speed things up because they're not. The problem with government is they add, they never take away.
Yeah.
They very rarely review an entire process and reset it. They tweak.
Right.
The problem is the more you layer tweaks on tweaks on tweaks on tweaks, the more it goes wrong. Someone was saying to me the other day that Elon Musk does something where he says, like, I'll get rid of 10% of processes. If the thing doesn't break, I know I didn't need them. Like that sort of approach was their example. I wouldn't suggest that approach, but to me, the problem is they go, I want to change a process. What do? I'm going to hire an outside consultant to tell me how to fix my process. Your own people know how to fix the process. I suspect there's a lot of excellent planners trapped in the City of Toronto system, smashing their head against the wall. And I used to know a developer who went to work for, I won't say which government agency, went to work for a government agency, lasted about a month and had to leave because he went into a meeting and said, these are the things we can fix. We can have these fixed in 6 weeks. And literally people were like, you can't do it that way. That's 3 or 4 years. And he just left.
Does the City of Toronto, are they unionized? Like, do they have
Yeah,
their own?
heavily unionized.
Yeah, so there's like a whole layer of...
But processes outside of that unionization sort of thing, and I'm not actually saying they need to lower the number of employees. I think they've just got them focused in the wrong areas and that the process is broken and there's too many fiefdoms. Again, around this mission creep, because, for example, I still remember a few years ago, we were trying to get a project approved. One of the engineering people, I won't say the department again, was away on vacation. We had to wait 3 weeks because this guy's away on vacation. Another one where we did it, the developer lost $3 million. The lawyer that did the deal wasn't around. The junior person didn't understand the deal. The whole thing got delayed. They were actually trying to reopen the thing. Yeah. Thankfully, it got solved, but that cost 3 months to a development moving forward, which was literally like a $3 million hit. Again, just poor process and lack of accountability.
I mean, this is not exclusive to Toronto. And
Toronto's just the worst, and Vancouver.
I think Mississauga's right up there, if I'm being honest. I have a project in Mississauga as well that's going through entitlement right now. And I'll tell you, it's not that the staff is incapable or incompetent. It's just we had to take them to OLT just to get them to respond to our applications in a timely manner. And the fact that we have to use the courts to get people in the right room or get the right people in the room together so that we can actually then have a conversation about something, I think that's not going to lead to sustainable growth.
No, I mean, if you look at Mississauga, there's not actually that much development. There's some around Square One and stuff, but if you look at the size of Mississauga as a city, I'd argue that relative development underway right now is low.
Yeah.
And part of that, obviously, is the former mayor hated development. I mean...
Who, Hazel?
No.
Bonnie.
Crombie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's well known that was not a fan of development in the slightest.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
No, it's
yeah.
a common
and
problem.
I live here, yeah.
And it's a common problem, and that's the challenge, I think, with the politicians being so heavily involved at this level.
Why would you hate it?
There's a certain people that lean a certain way that believe that developers shouldn't be building housing, they shouldn't make profit, they assume that the profit level's always high. It's the same in Toronto. There's certain councillors, everyone knows who they are, that will say one thing privately, another thing publicly, and then change their minds again. I believe there was a project just in York where councillor told the affordable housing people, we're going to support this, and as soon as he got in public, completely went against it. So the game they play, I will oppose you publicly, You go to the court system. I know you're going to get approved, but I'll come out and say, I said this was a terrible idea.
I tried.
Yeah, I tried.
I did my thing.
Now you've spent how much? $1 million extra year in development. Why? Because you're playing a game. How many councillors are qualified in real estate, do you think, in Canada? 1 or 2 maybe total?
Yeah.
So these people make decisions on real estate but have no idea about real estate.
Yeah.
They'll even ignore their planners' recommendations. Oakville had a 12-story building. I think the planners negotiated it down to 10. And then the councillors rejected it unanimously because a bunch of the locals complained.
Yeah.
So what's the point of the system? Why do the councillors make decisions on good housing practice? It doesn't make sense to me. The entire process allows...
Especially if you're going to go against your staff. Like if staff are making a recommendation, they're the topic experts in the city.
Yeah.
And then you're like, hey, you know what? I'm going to scrap this anyways.
That's why when I see like staff reject something or they have a point, to me, there's usually a valid point that needs to be worked out with the developer. That's what the planner's there to do. The planner's there to protect the city, make sure the city gets what it needs, the right sort of design, fits the neighborhood. Obviously, we have a housing crisis, needs to change that. Councillors are only driven by getting themselves voted in. They don't care about housing. They don't care if people are homeless. They just care about votes. Homeless people don't vote. People who are buying homes don't vote. The people who vote...
Why don't people that buy homes vote? Sorry, you said that twice. I just don't...
Well, because you've not got the home yet. So you've not moved in yet.
Oh, okay. You're saying like... Okay, I get it. Like the pre-sale home buyers don't have a vote yet.
If you own a home, think about it, right? If you own a home and they make sure your value's gone up, you've made what? You doubled your value since 2008 in your house? That's a lot of money you've made.
Yeah.
What, you're going to put that at risk? People are inherently driven by... I call it a bit of a fetish, House Sigma, the app. How many people have House Sigma on the phone? And literally, you'll be sat on the train and people are literally looking, when the market was changing, they were looking every single day. I had people in like Teams chats in the office. Oh, my house went up $10,000 today. That's what's driving people's mentality.
Right.
And that's where the process is broken is it's not rational decisions, they're emotional decisions. And when it comes to stuff like housing, when it comes to stuff like zoning, it should be an absolute discussion around math and policy and what's right.
Right.
Not an emotional decision, because people get very emotional about their homes. Everybody does.
Of course, it's your single largest purchase as a person,
usually,
right?
if you've got the house you love it, or you love the neighborhood and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Someone scary wants to put a 20-unit shelter around the corner from you, and it's panic.
Yeah.
All of these crazy people. Well, they're not actually crazy. They just don't have a house. There's a difference.
Also, like, even if you love your neighbors, how often are you seeing them? Like, I love my neighbors, and if I see them once a month, I'm happy.
I'd say that's way too many times. So
yeah.
that's...
I like my neighbors, yeah.
I'm antisocial, so it's different. I like to just sit in my backyard.
And, like, have your neighbors pop over the fence?
No, I put big, like, trees around and stuff.
Oh, okay.
I can see my neighbor to the top in the south. I like them. I wave, say hi.
That's all right. Your home is your private sanctuary. Yeah. I get that. Development charges in the GTA and Toronto in specific, or I guess Toronto and the GTA in general, are they too high, too low? Is it sustainable?
No, it's horrific and it's not sustainable. And the challenge with development charges isn't just the dollar value, it's the unpredictability that they just keep increasing.
Right.
I'll just increase it 50%.
Yeah, I've experienced that.
Yeah, so you're trying to underwrite a deal, it goes up 50%.
Yeah.
The other challenge you have with DCs is they send contradictory messages. So in Toronto, if you go TGS version 2, you can get a DC credit. The DC credit is basically barely moved. Right. Although someone from the city did come out and say, well, it went up 100%. I tried to explain 100% of zero is still zero, but it's barely moved.
Right.
Whereas the DCs have gone from like $9,000 to say $80,000 in a 2-bedroom. The credit's like $9,000 and it's gone from like $4,500. How does that make sense? Do you want sustainable or not? So the whole DC thing is part of what I said about the tax system. The tax system in Canada is broken, and it starts at the federal government's primarily responsible for because they take the most cash. The province's next in line has a few extra tools, but realistically, the only person with any major level of tools is the federal government. Municipalities are sat at the bottom, trying desperately to work within a budget. The challenge is that budget also then makes no sense because they have no self-control a lot of the times. And I know it's easy to judge someone in government probably looks at me and goes, oh my God, this idiot, he's never lived our lives. No, I never would want to. You couldn't pay me to work on the public side of things. It'd be soul destroying.
But okay, I have a bit of guilt with that, right? Because I complain a lot too, seeing it from this side. And it's like, well, if we're all complaining from the sidelines saying, you should fix this, and you should fix this, and you should fix this, but we are the qualified people. Like arguably the private sector has, the most qualified people that could potentially impact the public sector. Like if we all said, okay, you know what, we are done making money for ourselves, we want to go in for the greater good, and we're going to do public sector work, like, do you think we could improve this system?
No, because it's systemically broken, and that's the challenge. I don't think the problem with the public sector is they don't have good people. I think the system is utterly broken. As I said earlier about the person tried to change, you can't change stuff. It's so systemically overloaded with process for the sake of process.
Right.
There's no way to fix it because they've never gone back to year dot and gone, does this make sense in the first place? They just add.
Okay, but let's say we're past crisis and we're in catastrophe or whatever the next phase is.
Yep.
At some point, we're going to have to fix this.
No, they're just going to let it run and tweak around the edges.
And then what?
It'll just get worse and worse.
But then what does that do for
And every time they try and fix it, there'll be unintended consequences because there is no plan. What is the plan right now? There isn't one. Province runs around like around a headless chicken, puts a bunch of good stuff out, pulls it back because whoever did something they probably shouldn't do by the sounds of things. Again, I don't know what went on, but with the whole green belt, the planning, stuff like that, God knows what was involved in that.
Yeah.
And now we've got the feds just handing out cash like candy, who then said, oh, we've handed out all this money in the accelerator fund, but we don't think it'll lead to more housing. And you're like, all right. And then you got the municipalities who have no cash.
So what? Okay, we're not going to try to solve like all of the problems today. I have a question for you. Which statement is more true? I'm reading off my phone, by the way, for the questions, not because I'm looking at emails. Which statement is more true? Toronto is in a bubble, or Toronto is underpriced compared to other major cities like New York, Hong Kong, Sydney, etc.
Neither and both.
Okay, that's a very fence answer. Yeah,
it's not a fence answer because it's not a bubble because it's supply and demand.
Right.
But revenue can't increase because incomes relative to those other cities are too low in Canada. I think you could argue that Canadians are underpaid. And you can look at the economy, and the economy hasn't grown. Productivity is plummeting rapidly. And Canada's just lost its place in the global sort of pecking order with the developed countries. And it continues to drop rapidly. So you have underpaid people, and then you have housing that's increasing in price because there isn't enough of it.
Right.
Both of those factors need to correct. So is there a bubble? No, because we have way more people and we have houses. So how can there be a bubble? We need the houses.
Right.
But should the values increase, no, people can't afford them.
Yeah.
So it's yes and no to both. And that's why we're seeing the drain down right now to both to Calgary, into provincially, where people obviously leaving Ontario, heading to Calgary in droves. Mm-hmm. I think last year was 45,000 or something like that, and it's rapidly accelerating. And what's not being measured is we got a massive brain drain heading down south. I know a number of developers, I made the joke earlier, but people actually work in the industry, they're moving down to the US. You get paid the same or more, lower taxes, and houses. Go try buying a house in Texas and see what you get for your one-bedroom condo in Toronto.
Oh my gosh, I couldn't agree more. You know, like personally, my wife and I, we love where we live. We've obviously established some roots here. The amount of times that we talk about, like, why don't we test the water somewhere else? Like what's keeping us here? Especially because you face a lot of headwinds, right? Like now we sit here and we're like, okay, development, like the job that I do is not easy, right? And it seems like every step that I take, there's headwind, whether it's construction cost increases or lack of revenue increases to match the construction cost, or delays from the city, or we're like, well, it's just so much easier in other parts of the country, other parts of the world. Like, what's keeping us here? So what, in your opinion, like what drives all these people to come to Toronto, the GTA? Like, what is it? It's clearly not affordability.
No, I've got to the point where I don't know why anyone in their right mind would move to Toronto. I literally have reached the point where I don't get the draw anymore.
That's a scary thing.
And I made the joke online, and it was literally a joke. I made the joke that we're going to turn into the Detroit of the future, and people are like, no, you're being... And it was meant as an exaggeration, but to me right now, and I was out in Waterloo doing a presentation to the home builders out there, I think London, Waterloo, Kitchener is the next place to start putting significant volumes of people. Mm-hmm. We can do a mix of sprawl and vertical. We can build transit because it's fairly open down there. Right. A high-speed rail link into Toronto. Why keep trying to cram people into a system that doesn't want them?
Yeah.
And that's the challenge. The other thing when you start to look at immigration, I know that's a question coming up, is I think that a lot of immigrants are basically being lied to by the Canadian government. They're dragged in here. People are dentists, people are doctors, whatever qualifications, and it's not recognized. And then you pay $70,000 and 2 years to get qualified here, and then you're back, and you're perfectly qualified. I was in an Uber the other day with a guy who's a dentist, owns a bunch of practices back in India. I think he was actually qualified in the US too, and then they wouldn't recognize here. So he's driving an Uber for something to do while he does his training.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God, this guy should be teaching here, never mind actually owning his own practice. And you're like, what the hell is wrong with the system? And it's basically, I think his was like $60,000, $70,000. You pay $10,000 for an exam. If you pass, you get your money back. And you're like, it's just a money scheme.
Yeah.
Everyone's dragged into this dream, come to Canada, and then you go, oh, wait a minute, now I can't afford to live. I've got to drive a truck if I'm a vet because I've got to get qualified here. And I'm going to spend a year, and I have the money to buy a house, but I don't want to buy a house because I haven't got a job because no one will give me a mortgage to buy a house. Even if I've got cash, I've got to pay 100% because they don't recognize me as having credit.
That's crazy.
And you look at the whole system, you kind of go, I kind of get why you might want to leave to this dream, but is that dream here anymore, or is it kind of broken?
That's a very uncomfortable truth that I'm not even prepared to answer because I'm afraid if I'm honest with myself, I won't like the answer. To your point about, the professionals that come here and aren't licensed or can't use their skills, like their learned skills right away. I mean, I immigrated with my parents when I was younger. Both my parents, my mom's a doctor, my dad's an engineer. Both had to take a very long road to get relicensed. Both worked, entry-level jobs for a very long time while they were trying to get established in Canada. It takes a very long time. Like it probably takes like 4 or 5 years before you're on your feet. And some people can't wait that long. Some people don't have the wherewithal to be able to stand and to like get them up and running. Whereas in other parts of the country and other parts of the world, it's easier. So everything you're saying is scarily true, which is uncomfortable. I like even as we're talking, and this is not planned or whatever, but it's like, why do we live here?
Well, I mean, I'll phrase that differently. I don't want to live anywhere else in the world other than Canada. I moved here from the UK. I lived in Manchester. I much rather I live out in Milton. I love living in Milton, have no intention of leaving Milton. But I've been here for 20 odd years. And when I moved here, I could buy a house that was relatively affordable. I'm very lucky that I could buy a house.
Right.
To move here now, I think would be terrifying. But part of it, if you look at around immigration as well, construction, we know we have a shortage of labourers. We know, we see it. The Canadian government build force comes out, says, 20% of the market's going to leave. We're massively underserved. How many skilled trade people came in under the PR system last year, do you think? So we had over 1 million people turn up. Yeah. How many of those were skilled trades solving our problem?
I don't know.
450, somewhere in that region.
Yeah.
Entire country at the 1 million. I kid you not.
That's low.
Yeah, Richard Lyle did an interview the other day where he was mentioning that. It's insane. So if you look at it, it's the system that's broken. It's not the person wanting to move here because.
And that's a federal thing, though. Immigration is federal, right?
I think the whole system's broken. I think the challenge we have is between the feds, the province, and municipalities. None of them are on the same page across Canada. Not a single one of them is on the same page of what we're trying to do. And because of that, there is no plan. You go to other countries like Japan, and zoning tends to be more at a federal level. If you look at Tokyo, it's still relatively affordable-ish, kind of, but it's more balanced. The market doesn't have as much variability to it, right, despite the fact of the size of it, because there's more control. The systems are much more efficient, and they're primarily designed around making sure people have somewhere to live, and that those prices stay relatively stable.
Right, and they do believe, like I've been to Tokyo, like the 50-minute community is actually probably like a 5-minute community because you'll have everything you need on like one subway stop that has a mall on top of it, that has residential on top of that. So it's like one beautiful system, and then they replicate that 1 million times over.
Whereas here we don't. Every city's for itself. Yeah. Every province is on its own. And the feds meander aimlessly. I mean, obviously, the only reason the feds are interested in housing right now is because the Prime Minister came out and said the quiet thing out loud, housing isn't my problem, leave me alone. I mean, if he hadn't done that press conference, it probably wouldn't have all gone at him. And to be honest, I think that is the problem, this subdivision of things. And it's not just housing, because housing's one, a population comes in at housing, there's a knock-on effect on healthcare, there's a knock-on effect on education. And because there's no plan, we now have a shortage of nurses, doctors, Teachers were okay because obviously the Liberal government quite a while ago made changes to recruitment of teachers. But had they not oversupplied the teachers, we'd have had a problem there. But I think you'd still argue that education funding's off. The whole system's just kind of all teetering to fall apart. It's just housing's extremely noticeable and healthcare's extremely noticeable.
Because they're like our two biggest drivers of like economic growth anyways. Like housing is 50%. I think oil and gas is like 30 or 40. And then like healthcare, like we're not a super diverse country in terms of like the way that we make our money.
But
we
not.
should be. I mean, we bring in everybody from the world, so we have the potential to be diverse. Before we basically jump off and commit tribal suicide on Canada here, there is reasons to fight to be in Canada. I know we are talking about all of the things that can be better, just to add some positivity and so that people know that we do love this place. There is, like you said, there is no place I would rather be, because the multiculturalism and like the social aspects and the people aspects of this country are second to none. Are we broken economically? Could we do a lot better? I think so, but by no means, at least for myself, and you can chime in here, but like I'm not looking I want to find reasons to stay versus trying to convince people that we're broken and we need to leave.
No, and I think the thing is, if you make the changes, I mean, someone, I was out with dinner with someone, and someone actually said Canada should be the richest country in the world. It should be the most wealthy country in the world. If you unleash the potential, it's there. If you look at the oil and gas, if you look at the minerals that are available, if you look at Canada as a whole, we should be the wealthiest country in the world. That's why, to me, I think there's a positive. It's just a matter of getting the right leadership and someone being bold enough to change. The challenge is, I think the first person to be bold to change is going to struggle to get re-elected, because I think there's a huge plaster that needs ripping off, a lot of stuff that people aren't comfortable with. And the other thing is that diversity across Canada, each province is kind of like its own little country. It's no different than the US. Each state's got a slight nuance to it. It's got its own mindset. And I think that's part of the challenge the federal government always face. It's easy to judge, but they're kind of juggling hand grenades, because, you've got Alberta at one extreme in terms of thought process, then BC, we all make the joke, tree huggers and stuff like that.
Right.
And then Quebec's its own nuance of interesting things.
They want out,
So it's that thing. But to your point, my favorite thing in Canada is, like you said, it's that diversity is amazing.
Yeah.
Where else in the world can this many different people from different cultures, different countries get on reasonably well?
Just look.
There's no other examples.
This room is a microcosm, right? Like, there's 4 people from 4 different parts of the world. Like, there's 2 people behind the scenes here, and we all come from different countries, and we are all happy getting along and like generally like appreciate each other's company. That I come from a different part of the world. That's where I was born in Egypt, and I moved here when young, but I've gone back since. That doesn't exist that way in other parts of the world as easily and as cohesively as it does here.
No.
So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
No, and I think as much as you can get negative about things, I think a lot of the negativity comes out with people just frustration wanting the government to make changes versus then, like when people say, I think Canada's broken, it's more of a statement of frustration versus I think it's necessarily broken.
Yeah.
And I think it's that frustration that everyone sat there looking, going, why are you doing this to the government? And then they make it worse, and you're kind of like, well, why did you do that?
Okay, let's turn the argument around. Marlon, you are now the mayor of Toronto. The first 3 orders of business. I don't care if you want to be or not. The first 3, you are now the mayor of Toronto. The first 3 orders of business that you are going to do.
So this one was tricky because I was thinking about it. And my first order of business would actually be to get the GTA to merge together and actually leave Ontario. I don't believe the GTA and Ontario can coexist right now. I think that the size of the GTA compared to the rest of Canada and even the other provinces, if you looked at probably by 2040, we're going to be 10, 12 million population just in the GTA potentially.
Yeah.
It's its own province. It just doesn't have the decision making it needs to solve its problems. So to me, that's kind of that's outside of the box. And I'm like, it was a little crazy idea, but I was thinking about it in the car.
I don't hate
that. But I think
the
lack of control that we have, and it's not necessarily that we need that the cities don't exist within that. But if you look at the size of Toronto, Etobicoke, Mississauga, even as you move out to Brampton, they're cities on their own, and they're all fairly large cities in the Canadian terms on their own. And again, obviously, I didn't mean to drop as you move east as well. But as you move east, we get Ajax and stuff. This is a substantial geographic area, substantial population that can't make decisions for itself. Mm-hmm. And then the second one is, I think all of the processes just need blowing up. That's a tricky one because I don't think anything necessarily works the way it's supposed to work anymore. And you really need a hard look at those processes, not to save money, not this craziness, I'm going to lay off 10 people and save $5.
Right.
To be honest, if the staff stayed the same, it'd be a win-win if they were just refocused on different processes.
Yeah.
And I think the processes themselves are broken. It's more around moving to online, streamlining. I redid my British passport. I know that's not municipal as an example. I did it online. It literally took like 10 minutes. And then they sent me text messages telling me where my passport was in the process, like every week.
Right.
Well, it's not that complicated. Why isn't everything like that? Why isn't your development like that? I submit an application. Oh, it's with Joe Blob. He's looking at this. Oh, it's going to engineering next week. By week 5, you'll have it. And it shows you a little progress. How complicated would that be to do?
Well, that creates that creates accountability, right?
It does. And that's, to me, what the whole process thing would be around that accountability and recognizing the municipality, no matter you're in government, you're in the business of customer service. Every single thing you do is serving a customer, which is those constituents that vote for you. Within that voting, there's people that come in, developers that are going to build stuff that help your constituents. Everyone's a customer.
Right.
So change it to a customer service focused process. And then the third one would be in terms of development. Basically, NIMBYs cause so many problems.
What's a NIMBY? Just for the people that...
Not in my backyard. Basically, a crazy person that's probably got a massive line of credit against the house, doesn't want the house price to go down. But that aside, NIMBYs are a nightmare. And the thing that irks me, back to this accountability, is a NIMBY can delay your project by a year.
Yes.
And
they've done that to me.
It costs them nothing.
Yeah.
How about they put
$1,000 appeal?
Yeah, how about they put the money where the mouth is? If they're right, it costs them nothing. If they're wrong, they're paying your legal fees.
Yeah.
Them themselves, with their house that's doubled in value, you pay the legal fees. Because what really irks me is, if you look, there's a couple of examples in Toronto right now where people are challenging affordable housing. It's been going for years and years and years. It's just selfishness, and it's borderline disgusting. And the amount of money and time they're wasting for people that are desperate for a house is unbelievable. And the staff supported it. They've lost the legal claim. They've been through the planning, and now they're going to repeal it again. Mm-hmm. I guarantee you, if they were on the hook for $1 million between that neighborhood, there'd be a different approach to, I really, really hate this.
Yeah. There wouldn't be an appeal. They'd be over.
No, and I think that's the problem, is there's no accountability to the NIMBY. And that's the problem. The public at large can generally seems to be able to do whatever the hell they want at the cost of others.
Right. That's a scary power to give somebody, that you could put a wrench in, like, for example, like our 330 unit development, where we were going to bring, if we did not get appealed, we would have qualified for CMHC before the interest rates went up, and we would have fixed our rate, and we would have put 330 units up. But because we didn't, because we got appealed, we missed the interest rate window, interest rates started to climb up, and now we're like, okay, we have to pivot our business plan because CMHC...
But now you've impacted 330 people for the sake of a couple people
who lost the appeal.
Now can't get a home.
Yeah.
But then that actually goes out, because those 330 people move from somewhere else, those people move into there, perhaps those 330 people moving in together, it opens up, and you start to put all of that downstream.
Yeah.
And this one person's influencing thousands upon thousands of people who have no hope of a home, are pushing up the price of home through pure, unadulterated selfishness and this obsession with the value of their house.
Or fear. I think a lot of the time, I think it's fear.
Well, it's always traffic. It made me laugh. There was one project they were challenging. I think it might have been Vancouver. There was like 18 units. We're worried about the traffic. It's an affordable housing project, and there's hardly any parking. I'm not sure what traffic.
Yeah. Okay. Do you agree that most pre-sales are to investors now?
Now, yes. If you went back historically, it was a little lower. If you looked in Canada, on average, it was like 33% at one point, and then it went up to 40%. I think if you look at the units that are being completed now, that are condos, if you looked, say, 2-3 years ago, it's probably around 55% of those were then getting leased out as rental.
Yeah.
Like, you can track that. The last 2 years, it's been at 80-90%. So I'd say it's actually accelerating, and I think that's the economics to a degree.
Well, to that point, my follow-up question to that is the current state of the returns or the investor model sustainable, being that an investor buys in, waits 3 years, and then they have negative carry, and all they're relying on is capital appreciation?
I think that there's two different ways to look at condo investment. There's the capital appreciation, but it's not just capital appreciation, it's safe haven. Canada being a safe haven to store money. And everyone always then assumes that's money laundering, but that's a ridiculous assumption.
It's an inflation hedge.
Be a tiny part of the market.
Yeah.
There's examples, Egypt, someone told me the other day, an apartment in the Wells owned by an Egyptian doctor, he bought it, cash.
Yeah.
It's just a way of putting money somewhere where, yeah, he's probably losing $1,000 a month if he had a mortgage. I'm guaranteeing he probably doesn't have a mortgage, and he's just looking at it that, like you said, it's an inflation hedge.
So I'll tell you specifically, since we're talking about Egypt, we went to Egypt in the summer of last year, and it was $1 is 37 Egyptian pounds. It has not even been a year, and it's $1 for 60 Egyptian pounds now.
Yeah, and I think people miss what investors are doing, and then the problem is then when you get
you're parking your money, you're
foreign,
protecting
foreign ownership.
Yeah,
We're
all foreigners.
It's not like this person's a drug runner, they're a doctor. And I think that's the challenge is when people who are foreign, which is most of the country these days, are investing money, it's seen as bad. And I think it's just becoming an easy thing to blame. The more and par type people, I think they rely a little bit more, obviously, on cash flow. Part of the challenge there is I think there is quite, I don't know what the volume is. There's quite a lot of people where families have got together, they've done the units, and they got carried away with it's going to go up in value.
Right.
But when the interest rates changed, they couldn't cash flow it. To me, that's just bad decisions. It's like the stock market. You got to be careful how you invest, and you see that. And I think if you see a lot of assignments right now, it's people that thought they could buy 3 units, they could get rid of them quickly, or they'd be able to rent them.
Yeah.
And you don't want, and realistically, you don't actually want positive cash anyway, because then you got to pay tax. You're actually better off with negative. Because now you've got tax
zero.
Zero or
zero is the most ideal, actually, because then you're not.
I like negative. It depends on how you're structured.
You can use CCA, like capital cost allowance, to like offset any income.
Yeah, so to me, it helps depending on how you look at things. But no, is it sustainable? I don't know. I mean, the market's probably been negative cash flow for years now, be that 100, 200. I think the thing that's exacerbated it is now it could be $1,000 because of the interest rates change.
Yeah.
Which is where it gets scary if you're not looking for capital accumulation or you have a relatively low mortgage. But the way I look at it right now is depending where you've invested, there should only be an upside. The question is how far can that upside go? And then the question in terms of the upside is how quickly will that change? I don't think it's going to be like historically where, every year it's bouncing up massive percentages, but there still should be an upside. And that's why you still see in terms of investors, if the project's going to take 6 years to build, are still interested now. People just don't want stuff that's in and out in 2 to 3 years because they know the market will change and the market will come back, and that Toronto, Canada has great fundamentals in terms of population growth. You pull down our population down to a regular level of growth and the country's still going to grow.
Right.
There's still going to be capital accumulation, perhaps not the same level you had before. Rents still have room to move very slightly. The problem we have is it's not the middle sector or the upper middle section we have a problem, it's the affordable side at the bottom.
Yeah.
I think if we can fix that, it actually helps everybody else. So this obsession the government has with only fixing middle income rental projects is actually the wrong direction. I think if you fix the bottom
up,
it pushes it up. The same when you start to look, and people make fun of me saying I'm a socialist, I'm more conservative than socialism, but it's in terms of the income levels, we need to push them up. And that's not handing people cash, that's giving people the ability to make a higher income. And so that, we need a diversity of industry and stuff. So to me, the whole system needs pushing it from the bottom up, not the current approach of only helping people who vote.
Okay, I got 2 more questions for you, and then I will let you go. One has nothing to do with what we've been talking about so far, but do you have an opinion on the current state of the Residential Tenancies Act?
I think the entire thing's just, it's almost farcical.
Yeah, why? What could we do to fix it?
I mean, basically, the tenant has more rights than anyone else on the planet by the looks of things, and that's the challenge you have. And I think that's why we've seen, notwithstanding the expensive laneway suites and they're quite expensive to do, I think that's why we haven't seen the same growth in secondary units that the market assumed would happen. Outside of Brampton, which obviously has 16,000 illegal basement conversions.
Right.
The legal approach is a little tricky to do, and I think it's around that risk of they really do protect tenants. You go to the board, you appeal, you could be there for a year and a half, at which point you're $30,000 in the hole, and you got no chance of recovering it.
Yeah.
And it's genuinely, it was interesting. I was up in Ottawa talking to a bunch of people, and they were talking about, I might convert my basement, and their biggest fear isn't the cost. It's the tenant.
It's getting a bad
tenant.
tenant.
And it's not even sharing the space. Because I assume, because for me, that'd be hell on earth. Someone else living in my house with me, it'd be like my worst nightmare. So I'm assuming this, and like, oh, no, I like people. Why if I get a bad tenant? And it was interesting because my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, they had a little house in Windsor, and to supplement the income, they had they converted the upstairs into a little studio.
Right.
They're the same guy for 20 years, paid on time. I don't know if he was the nicest guy in the world, but he paid on time.
Right.
They then went through bad tenant after bad tenant after bad tenant, and by the time you got to repaint, replace the fridge, stuff like that, and again, it's ma and pa, literally this time.
Yeah.
And they kind of, by the end of it, they're like, oh my God, I don't want to lease this thing anymore. I don't know who I'm going to get.
It's very scary.
And they tried all sorts of demographics. They started messing around. Like, I'll get a young person with a kid. They'll be responsible. No. And then it's like, I don't get paid my rent. And the problem is to them, it mattered.
There's disincentive because, even if you're a good tenant, it's almost like the system is motivating you to push the limits, right? Like, it's like, yeah, what happens if I don't pay the rent this month? You're going to issue me an N4 and then what, an L1? And then I'm going to go see you in court in 4 months? Like, let's talk about it. And by then, maybe my money woes have figured themselves out.
And again, the system's set up for the tenant. Like, if you see, how many times do people talk about a bad tenant in government? Very rarely.
Yeah.
But someone renovates a basement, throws someone out, renovates a unit, renovation, and then all of a sudden the developer's evil.
Yeah.
And it could be genuine renovation. I know there is cases where people have...
There are slumlords.
There is a small percentage of bad actors in every market, but immediately that's the focus. And then it's, we got to do rent control. Well, control doesn't work. It hasn't worked all over the world. Now we want to do occupancy control. So you move from one tenant to the next tenant. I'm going to control that rent increase.
Yeah.
Since when is controlling a market that's supposed to fluctuate based on supply and demand as any form of restriction works? The other challenge then you have is, you've got the act that drives some of that too. But now as a developer, why the hell do you want to build rental and be stuck in this? The mess, and it's the unpredictability. It's not the act on its own. It's the unpredictability of the whole market. Some other government guy turns up next week, has got a different idea, blows the whole thing up. Now you're building value. Is it worth 100 million? Is it worth 50 million? If I've got a loan of 60 million and now it's worth 50 million, I got a problem.
Yeah. So, I think there just needs to be an equal amount of consequence for both sides of that equation.
It needs to be fair.
Yeah. Final question, and then we've taken up a lot of your time today, so thank you. Where do you invest your capital? Like, what's your investment thesis these days?
I'm really bad. I don't like investing. I'm like the worst person for that question ever. And when I saw it, I laughed. So I do have one rental unit.
Okay. Well, it doesn't even have to be in real estate. Like, what industries, what markets? Like,
no, I just do like the RRSP. I don't even look at it. I just let
standard.
my person at TD take care of it for me.
Which is okay.
I'm funny because I tend to see the bad side in everything.
Right.
I'm really bad at investment because I'm so risk adverse that I don't like investment. And it's really funny because people are like, well, if you'd have gone into the market, the deals you could have got, you'd have probably been retired by now. Yeah, but there's stress involved in that. And I'm kind of like, it's really funny. I think if I was a developer, I like rental. So if I was on the development side, I do like rental as a long-term uptick in Canada because I think the government's always going to struggle to put money into purchase housing because they see it as a profit.
Right.
I think industrials going to have a bit of a slowdown just because of the price of land. So I think if it was 4 or 5 years ago, I'd have put everything in industrial. Now I'd be a bit more hedgy, but I really do think multifamily is the way to go. And then in terms of investment, oh my God, I'm terrible. Like I said, I look at the stock market. I'd rather bet on soccer matches. Well, football. David Beckham got in trouble for using soccer at the BAFTAs. I should say football. But I'd rather bet my money on Bet365 or something like that than
Not financial advice here.
Yeah.
Not financial advice. Yeah. Well, Marlon, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. This has been extremely informative, and the quality of the information that has been given by an industry expert is very valuable to me personally. I've learned a lot today, and I'm sure it'll be extremely valuable to the people that listen to the podcast. So thank you so much for being on.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey everyone. Well, that's another episode of the Bassem Hanna podcast. If you want to see this full episode or any of our previous episodes, you can go to bassemhanna.com. That's BASEMHANNA.com. Or you can find us on social media. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, as well as on Spotify. As always, your likes and shares are greatly appreciated. Until next time, have a good one.